Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. Deep in the quiet Oklahoma countryside, a lone farmer uncovers a toxic secret buried in his land, literally. When the powerful HOA next door starts a war of lies, lawsuits, and sabotage, he fights back the only way he knows how, with evidence, grit, and a truckload of justice. I found the dump by accident, which somehow made it worse. I was riding the fence line on the far western edge of my land, the part nobody ever sees unless they're lost or trespassing. 400 acres gives you a lot of places to ignore if you're not careful, and that ravine sat tucked behind a low hill like it was trying to hide. I noticed the smell first. Not manure, not rot, but that sharp chemical stink that hits the back of your throat and tells you something doesn't belong. When I crested the hill, I saw tire tracks cutting through grass that had been fine a week earlier. Fresh tracks. Heavy ones. The ravine looked like a landfill had coughed and died in it. Black bags split open, drywall chunks, broken cabinets, shredded insulation, rusted metal, old mattresses folded like dead animals, tires stacked and half buried, plastic sheeting flapping in the wind like surrender flags. It wasn't one careless dump. It was organized, repeated, deliberate. I sat there longer than I want to admit, engine idling, trying to convince myself there had to be some explanation that didn't involve someone using my land as a free trash can. That explanation never showed up. At first, I told myself it had to be drifters or contractors cutting corners. I didn't want to think worse. I hauled out gloves, poked through the mess, and found the kind of debris that doesn't wander in on its own. Kitchen remodel scraps, branded moving boxes, packaging from new appliances. This wasn't random junk. It was suburban garbage. Somebody had paid someone else to make it disappear, and it had ended up rotting on my pasture. I set up one of my trail cameras that night. Motion sensor infrared, the kind hunters use when they don't trust the daylight. I aimed it straight at the dirt path leading down into the ravine and forgot about it for a few days, mostly because I didn't want to be right. When I checked the footage the following week, I didn't need to scrub through much. Around 2 in the morning, headlights crept into frame. A truck backed down like it had done it before. On the door, plain as day, was the logo for DP Hauling. The tailgate dropped. Bags flew. The truck pulled out without hesitation. That name sat heavy in my chest. DP Hauling wasn't some fly-by-night outfit. It belonged to Dale Payne. Everyone in town knew that, whether they liked him or not. And everyone knew his wife, Loretta Payne, president of the Prairie Oaks Homeowners Association. 200 houses, 6 years old, built right up against what used to be nothing but fields. My fields. I replayed the clip until my jaw hurt from grinding my teeth. I checked older drone footage I had from the summer, just routine passes I did after storms. I hadn't been looking for trucks back then, but once you know what you're looking for, you can't unsee it. Headlights on the far path, dust trails at night, shapes that shouldn't have been there. This had been going on longer than I wanted to admit. The cows knew before I did. They avoided the ravine like it was cursed, wouldn't graze near it, wouldn't drink from the runoff after rain. Animals don't lie to themselves the way people do. I drove home that evening with the footage on a memory card in my pocket and the uncomfortable understanding that someone nearby had made a business decision involving my land without asking me. I wasn't angry yet, not fully. Mostly I felt that slow, tightening pressure behind the eyes that tells you trouble has already started, whether you're ready or not. I drove over to the Prairie Oaks HOA office that next Monday morning, dust still on my boots and a zip drive in my pocket. The HOA building wasn't much. A repurposed model home dressed up with a flag, a new sign, and the faint smell of citrus cleaner trying to cover up the stench of bureaucracy. The kind of place where people smile too wide and pretend their clipboards matter. I asked to speak with Loretta Payne. The woman at the desk, all acrylic nails and forced friendliness, looked me up and down like I'd tracked cow shit through a country club. She told me Mrs. Payne was very busy, but when I said it was about illegal dumping, suddenly I was ushered into a little glass-walled conference room like I'd walked in holding a subpoena. Loretta came in 5 minutes later, smelling like perfume and condescension. Tall, stiff posture, hair pulled into a bun that looked like it could deflect bullets. She didn't sit, just crossed her arms and gave me that HOA smile that's only used on people they want gone. "Mr. Harding," she said, "I've been told you have concerns?" I plugged the drive into their office laptop and let the video speak for me, Grainy night vision footage lit up the screen. Her husband's company logo. The truck reversing into my ravine. Trash bags tumbling out. The timestamp blinking like a pulse. "That your husband's rig?" I asked. Quiet. She didn't flinch. Didn't even blink. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said smoothly. "Our contractor disposes of waste at an approved landfill. We have documentation." I tapped the screen. "He didn't that night, or the 5 other times I caught him on camera. That's my land, Mrs. Payne. I didn't sign a damn thing with your HOA. This needs to stop, and I want that garbage removed." She leaned over the table like I was the one trespassing. "If there's trash on your land, Mr. Harding, perhaps you should improve your security. We can't be held responsible for what random people do in the middle of the night." I stared at her, baffled by the size of the lie and how comfortably she wore it. "That truck belongs to DP Hauling. That's your husband's business." "Anyone can slap a logo on a truck," she said, like I was a child who had mistaken the Easter Bunny for a burglar. "Video can be edited. If you're making accusations, I suggest you contact your attorney." I stood slowly, not because I was done, but because I knew nothing I said would matter to her. She walked me to the door like I was the one who had made a mistake. "Oh, and Mr. Harding," she added, right as I stepped out. "This is private HOA property. Please don't come back unless you have an appointment." The next week was a circus. First, I filed a complaint with the Municipal Environmental Enforcement Office. A guy named Lutz came out 2 days later in khakis and a clipboard. He walked the site for maybe 10 minutes, took 3 photos, and told me he couldn't confirm the origin of the debris. Said unless I had eyewitness testimony or chain of custody documentation, there wasn't much he could do. Case closed. The very next day, a county health inspector showed up unannounced on my farm, said he'd received an anonymous tip about unsanitary conditions and livestock waste runoff. He poked around my barns, took samples from the creek near the west fence, and looked disappointed when all he found was clean water and healthy cows. Then I got a letter from the county assessor's office. A reassessment of my land's value was scheduled. Their estimate tripled my property tax. No explanation. A week later, my bank called. They were reviewing terms on the equipment loan I took out last year for the new tractor. Said they'd need additional collateral to continue servicing it. And just to top it all off, I started hearing things at the feed store, in town, even at church. People whispering about how Harding let a dump grow on his own land, how I was trying to squeeze money out of the HOA, how maybe I should have just minded my own damn business. I knew then it wasn't just Loretta. She had people, friends in the right places, or maybe just enough favors banked with the wrong ones. She wasn't going to stop. I stopped riding out to the ravine every day, not because I didn't care, I just couldn't stomach seeing what it had become. What used to be a shallow dry cut through the pasture, shaded by wild cottonwoods and home to rabbits and the occasional fox, now looked like something left behind after the apocalypse. And no matter how many cameras I set up, the garbage just kept coming. The trucks didn't even bother hiding anymore. I caught them on footage 6 times in 4 weeks. Same rig, same route. Always between midnight and 3 a.m. Always DP hauling. Same driver too, though I couldn't get a clear face shot. Not yet. They backed down that hill like they had a goddamn lease on it. I added 2 more trail cameras, one higher up in the trees to catch plate numbers from above. Another hidden in a fence post pointing back down the road. Between them, I got nearly a dozen solid clips of the same truck making the same drop, all time-stamped, all showing my land being buried under HOA waste. And it wasn't just garbage anymore. It was poison. I found cracked containers with unknown liquids, dried paint, broken tiles, busted sheetrock soaked in mold. The rain carried runoff straight down into the lower pasture. I found 2 of my cows standing by the water trough one morning, trembling. Third one was lying half submerged in the runoff ditch, eyes glassy. I called the vet. Fast. He did what he could. Took blood. Ran tests. His report came back 2 days later. Signs of chemical ingestion, likely from industrial waste. He said I was lucky it was only 1 cow dead. The other 2 might recover. Lucky. That damn word stuck in my throat. That cow had a name. Rosie. She was born during a storm 3 years back. I'd bottle-fed her myself when her mother rejected her. She followed me around like a dog the first 6 months of her life. And now she was gone because some HOA wanted to save a buck on landfill fees. I started digging through the piles myself. Gloves, mask, heavy-duty boots. I went through it bag by bag, because if they wanted to pretend it wasn't theirs, I'd find the truth in their own trash. Took me hours, days, every morning after feeding, every evening after sundown. And I found it. Credit card offers addressed to Michael Trenton, 248 Prairie Oaks Lane. A late payment notice from the HOA itself, stamped and signed by Loretta. A printout of an email exchange between board members about reducing trash pickup costs by revisiting alternative disposal strategies. Meeting notes, HOA stationery, torn in half. I pieced them back together like a goddamn forensic tech. I took photos of everything, dated them, bagged the evidence like a crime scene. I wasn't playing farmer anymore. I was building a case, but the land kept dying under me. Grass along the edges of the ravine turned yellow, then gray. Bugs disappeared. Even the coyotes stopped coming near. The wind down there didn't smell like Oklahoma anymore. It smelled like melted plastic and rusted anger. I didn't know if I was angrier about the garbage or the silence. No calls back from the county. No word from the environmental office. No one wanted to touch this. I was a man shouting into the void, and the void smelled like benzene. I knew they thought I'd just give up, that I'd get tired, that I'd sell the land or pave over the mess or quietly eat the loss like a good little nobody. But every new piece of trash I found made me more certain. I wasn't going anywhere, and neither was this garbage. Not until someone took responsibility. By the time I decided to move the trash, I had already accepted that there was no version of this story where I stayed clean. I didn't mean morally, I meant legally, socially, reputationally. Loretta had made it clear she was comfortable playing in the mud, and the county had proven they were happy to look the other way as long as it didn't splash on their shoes. If I kept waiting for someone else to fix it, I'd be standing in that ravine until it swallowed the pasture whole, so I stopped waiting. I planned it the way I plan everything on the farm, slow, methodical, with backup plans for when something breaks. I rented an extra trailer under my cousin's name, bought industrial gloves, respirators, and heavy-duty straps. I didn't rush. I didn't rage. I worked, night work mostly, because that's when the trucks had done their damage, and it felt appropriate to undo it under the same stars. It took multiple trips. The smell alone would have knocked a weaker man flat. Every load reminded me how long this had been going on, how comfortable they'd gotten using my land like a secret toilet. HOA bags, broken furniture still tagged with Prairie Oaks delivery stickers. The same names I'd seen on envelopes now stared back at me from smashed Amazon boxes and torn mail. They hadn't even bothered to shred half of it. Arrogance does that to people, makes them sloppy. I hauled the last load just before dawn on Sunday. The streets of Prairie Oaks were silent, manicured, perfect, sprinklers ticking like metronomes, flags hanging still. I parked right in front of the HOA administration building, the heart of the whole polished lie, and unloaded everything in neat, deliberate piles. No scattering, no vandalism, just a mountain of exactly what they'd sent me. I made a sign out of scrap plywood and a Sharpie. Nothing fancy. Returning your property. Respectfully, Clint Harding. I propped it right at the front. Before I left, I sent the drone up. Got clean aerial shots, the logo on the building, the piles of trash, the sign, the symmetry of it all. I didn't post it yet. That could wait. The phone started ringing before I made it back to my truck. By 9 in the morning, Prairie Oaks looked like an anthill kicked by a boot. Residents stood in robes and jogging gear, hands over mouths, pointing, gagging. Loretta's SUV screeched into the lot like she was late for her own execution. Someone called the police. Someone else called the local news. I knew because I'd finally sent the footage to one person. Her name was Tess Grayson, young reporter, too curious for her own good. She'd come out to the farm 2 days earlier, notebook in hand, skepticism all over her face. She hadn't believed me at first, not fully, but the footage, the documents, the death report from my vet, that had cracked something. I texted her the drone shots and a single line, "You might want to wake up early." She did. By noon, the story was everywhere online. By evening, Loretta was on camera, red-faced, talking about environmental terrorism and an unhinged farmer with a grudge. She said I'd endangered families. She said I'd dumped waste illegally on HOA property. She never once said it wasn't theirs. I watched it all from my kitchen table, mud still under my nails, coffee going cold. I knew the hammer was coming. Lawsuits, charges, maybe cuffs if the wrong officer showed up. But for the first time since I'd found that ravine, the lie was sitting out in the open where everyone could smell it, and it smelled just like my pasture had. The lawsuit landed 2 days later like a brick through a stained glass window. Certified letter, hand-delivered by a smug guy in a golf cart wearing a Prairie Oaks security polo. He looked disappointed when I didn't flinch. I signed for the envelope and wished him a safe ride back to Fantasyland. Inside was the expected stack of legal bile, a civil suit from the Prairie Oaks Homeowners Association against me, Clint Harding, for the following sins: illegal dumping of hazardous waste, ecological vandalism, malicious mischief, and my personal favorite, emotional trauma inflicted upon residents due to visual and olfactory disruption. They were demanding $225,000 in damages. They also wanted a restraining order, a cease and desist, and a public apology. I laughed so hard I choked on my coffee. I wasn't surprised, not really, but I was a little impressed. It takes a certain kind of gall to poison a man's land, kill his livestock, then sue him for returning the favor. Their lawyer even included photos of the garbage piles, my photos taken from the drone, watermarked and all. That told me two things. One, they were scared enough to steal evidence, and two, they didn't think I had anything better. They were wrong on both counts. I called my attorney, Marty Havelock, a man whose voice always sounded like it came with a side of bourbon and who enjoyed lawsuits the way other folks enjoy fishing. He had been semi-retired until I called, but he perked up at illegal dump site and damn near salivated when I told him it involved a HOA, municipal corruption, and a dead cow. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that you've got video evidence, physical trash with addresses, a vet's toxicology report, and a falsified zoning map." "Working on the last one," I said. "But yeah, everything else is real." He whistled low. "Clint, I think you just bought me a new boat." We filed the counterclaim the next day. Illegal dumping, environmental damage, loss of livestock, defamation, harassment, emotional distress. Total damages sought $65,000. Marty made it nice and clean. Then, the cherry on top, we submitted a formal request to the district court for discovery of HOA records, including all financial transactions with DP Hauling for the past 3 years. That's when they started to sweat. Tess, the journalist, published her second article right around then, "When the Trash Doesn't Leave: How Prairie Oaks Outsourced Its Waste and Its Conscience." It included snippets from the HOA meeting minutes I'd found in the ravine, excerpts from the vet's report, and a side-by-side comparison of the garbage on my land and the garbage dumped in their own public square. My sign made the front page. But the real bomb dropped the day I got a manila envelope in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a printed email thread between Loretta Payne and an inspector named Carl Dellinger from the county zoning office. I recognized his name. He was the one who dismissed my original complaint without blinking. The emails made it sickeningly clear why. Loretta had written, "We've had issues with Mr. Harding before. The land is technically ours if you look at the 2017 boundary update. Please ensure this doesn't become a larger issue. HOA funds are at risk." Carl replied, "Understood. No traceable report." Consider it handled. I nearly crushed the paper in my hand. This wasn't just trash anymore. This was fraud. They had redrawn the lines on paper to make it look like my land had somehow become part of the HOA jurisdiction, something I would never agree to and had absolutely not signed for. The updated map looked official, stamped, sealed, fake. I took it straight to Marty. He grinned like Christmas had come early. Let's see if the court likes being lied to. We amended the counterclaim. Added zoning fraud, intentional misrepresentation, and submission of falsified documentation in a civil case. Marty said we were within inches of pushing this into criminal territory. Meanwhile, the court set a hearing date for both the HOA's complaint and our counterclaim. It wasn't a full trial yet, but it would be enough to air the evidence. Tess was already setting up for a third article. The comments on her pieces were brutal. Residents of Prairie Oaks were turning. Some had started contacting her anonymously, telling her about HOA funds that never made it to public improvements, about secret meetings, about how Loretta had been promising to cut waste costs for years. I guess she never said how. By the end of the week, I got a call from a Prairie Oaks board member, not Loretta, a guy named Sean McKinley, treasurer or vice chair or some equally soft title. He sounded nervous. "Mr. Harding," he said, "I was hoping to de-escalate things. The HOA board feels this has gotten out of hand." "Yeah," I said. "That tends to happen when you commit fraud, kill livestock, and dump your problems on someone else's land." He coughed. "Look, maybe we can arrange some kind of settlement." quiet. No more stories. No court. You'll need to talk to my lawyer, I told him, and maybe a priest, depending on how much you were in on this. I hung up. And I smiled. For the first time in months, they were the ones backing up, the ones sweating, and the ones who were about to learn that some farmers may be quiet, but we don't forget where the shit came from. The first subpoena went out on a Wednesday, and by Friday, Prairie Oaks looked more like a shaken beehive than a neighborhood. The moment the court granted discovery, Marty wasted no time pulling every thread he could get his hands on. We demanded complete accounting records from the HOA, itemized billing between DP Hauling and Prairie Oaks, official minutes from board meetings, and all communication with municipal departments regarding zoning or environmental issues. Marty didn't nibble. He went for the throat. They stalled, of course. Claimed some files had been accidentally purged. Others were offline for maintenance. But we already had enough garbage-derived evidence to make any missing record look suspicious. Tess was still digging, too. She called me late one night, voice buzzing with energy like she'd mainlined coffee and vengeance. "Got something," she said. "The landfill, the real one the HOA is supposed to be using. They've never logged a single load from DP Hauling in the last 3 years. Not one." That hit like a hammer. For 3 years, Dale Payne had been billing the HOA $8,000 a month according to the few invoices we had recovered, and not a single load had ever reached the legal dump. That meant all the trash had to go somewhere, and my ravine was just one destination. Tess published her third piece, Phantom Pickups, How a Suburban HOA Vanished Its Trash for Profit. She had confirmation from the landfill, commentary from a local environmental lawyer, and direct quotes from my vet's toxicology report. She stopped short of calling it organized crime, but the word embezzlement appeared 6 times. The story blew up, picked up by state news, and even made the regional CBS affiliate. The HOA board tried to call it slander, but the truth was out, and the internet has a way of not forgetting. And then came the driver. His name was Ricky Hess, mid-30s, tattoos up his neck, and a permanent squint like he was always looking into trouble. He showed up at the feed store one morning and asked if I was the farmer with the dead cow. I said I was. He introduced himself and said he used to work for Dale Payne until 2 weeks ago when Dale fired him for being too nosy. We sat on a bench behind the store while he smoked 3 cigarettes in a row. Said he used to drive for DP Hauling on weekends, mostly night shifts. Thought nothing of it at first. Dump runs were supposed to be legal. Then one day, he asked why they never got weighed at the landfill like other contractors. Dale told me. Ricky said, "Don't worry about it." Said the HOA had an arrangement. I asked if he'd testify. He nodded. Said he'd already talked to a reporter. Tess had found him first. Good girl. That weekend, the county prosecutor opened a formal investigation. Not civil, criminal. The subpoenas went wider. Dale's business license got flagged. The Department of Environmental Quality sent a crew out to the ravine wearing hazmat suits. They took samples from the soil, the water, and the decomposed debris. A week later, I got a copy of their preliminary report. Heavy metals, paint solvents, asbestos fibers, benzene traces. It wasn't just household trash. They'd dumped construction waste, industrial runoff, and things that should have been hauled to a Class 1 hazardous facility, the kind of mess that takes decades to heal and tens of thousands to clean. That same week, Marty and I got confirmation that the county inspector who had originally dismissed my complaint, Carl Dellinger, was Loretta's brother-in-law. It wasn't just nepotism. He'd approved forged documents, ignored environmental protocol, and blocked other inspectors from reviewing the site. When confronted by the DA's office, he resigned within 24 hours. Last I heard, he was lawyering up hard. By then, even Prairie Oaks residents were turning. Tess got emails from anonymous board members, HOA volunteers, and angry homeowners demanding transparency. Someone leaked a recording of a recent emergency board meeting. In it, Loretta screamed at the others for being cowards and disloyal, while Sean McKinley, the vice chair, said, "You told us the dump was legal, Loretta. We trusted you." It was theater, and the public was eating it up. One particularly angry homeowner, a retired Marine named Hank Jaspers, organized a public protest. Not a big one, maybe 20 people, but they marched right up to the HOA building holding signs like, "Where's our money?" and "No dump zone." Local TV aired it. Loretta wasn't interviewed. She'd locked herself in her office and refused to come out. And then came the maps. See, we finally got access to the original zoning records, county files dated and sealed, showing the true property lines from before Prairie Oaks even existed. My land had never been part of any proposed annexation. There was no 2017 update. That map Loretta had submitted to the court, the one showing my ravine as within HOA extended bounds, completely fabricated. The forensics team confirmed it. The seal was copied digitally, the font didn't match official templates, and the date field had been manually altered. The court clerk called it one of the most amateur attempts at forgery he'd ever seen. Marty was thrilled. We added a new motion to the counterclaim, this time seeking punitive damages and pushing the court to recommend criminal referral. With the environmental findings, the zoning fraud, and the financial embezzlement, it wasn't just a civil dispute anymore. It was a multi-pronged scandal. Prairie Oaks called for an emergency election to remove the board. Loretta didn't resign. Not yet. But her voice had gone quiet. Dale, on the other hand, was nowhere to be found. According to Tess, he'd skipped town. She even called in a tip to the State Highway Patrol just in case. The court date was set. Full hearing. 2 weeks out. I stood in the middle of the ravine one evening, staring at the empty space where the last of the garbage had been. It still smelled wrong, still felt cursed, but it was empty. And for the first time in months, no one had dumped a thing. I'd even noticed the coyotes coming back. Whatever happened next, they'd finally stopped. The courthouse smelled like floor wax and tension. I'd been in courtrooms before, traffic tickets, land surveys, the usual, but never for something like this. The case had been moved to district court in Stillwater to avoid conflict of interest, which was legal speak for everyone in the local courthouse knows the pains. It wasn't a jury trial yet. This was the big preliminary hearing, the HOA's civil suit against me, our counterclaim, and the matter of the forged map. Judge Holloway presided, white hair, narrow eyes, no patience for theatrics. He looked at everyone like they were already wasting his time. Loretta showed up with 2 lawyers in tow, both out of town, both wearing smug like it was cologne. She wore a conservative navy suit and that same tight polished bun. Her husband wasn't with her. Dale was still missing, officially out of state on business, unofficially somewhere avoiding a subpoena. Marty leaned over to me before we started and whispered, "Look like a man who's been wronged, not one who's here to gloat." I nodded. Truth be told, I didn't feel like gloating. I felt tired, like the last few months had aged me 10 years. The HOA's attorney went first. His voice was smooth, the kind of voice that sounded expensive. He called me vindictive, said my so-called evidence was circumstantial, and painted me as an eccentric recluse who launched an environmental hazard campaign in a fit of rural rage. He cited their right to peace and safety, and called the trash return an act of deliberate hostility against a peaceful community. I thought Judge Holloway might fall asleep during that part. Then it was Marty's turn. He started slow, like a man setting traps. He showed the court the videos, 6 separate dumps, all after midnight, same truck, same logo. Then the trash itself, labeled mail, HOA correspondence, receipts, all recovered from the ravine. He presented the vet's toxicology report, photos of Rosie, the environmental findings from the DEQ showing chemical contamination, and finally the drone footage of the garbage return. Then he dropped the forged map. This document, he said, holding it up with gloved fingers, was submitted to both the court and the zoning commission as evidence that Mr. Harding's land was under HOA jurisdiction. We now know this document is a forgery. We have expert testimony, metadata analysis, and sworn affidavits from the county records office confirming it never existed in any legitimate capacity. Judge Holloway raised an eyebrow at Loretta's team. Response: one of her lawyers stood. That document was submitted in good faith, Your Honor. If there was an error, it was clerical. Marty interrupted. It includes a digital signature from a zoning official who retired in 2016. The judge stared at them like they'd just insulted his dog. I see. Then Marty introduced Ricky Hess. Ricky took the stand wearing his one good shirt and looking like a man who knew too much. He confirmed every dump run, named dates, times, even showed his old pay stubs with handwritten notes from Dale. He testified that Dale instructed him to avoid landfills and instead take it out west where nobody'll complain. He pointed to me in court and said, "That man didn't complain, he fought back." When it was my turn, I didn't say much. I told the judge what I'd seen, what I'd lost. Showed him the emails from the anonymous source inside the county, including the one where Loretta called the land ours anyway. I ended with the quote from the sign I left in the HOA plaza. "Returning your property. Respectfully." There was silence in the courtroom when I sat down. The judge took a recess. When he returned, he didn't waste time. The plaintiff's suit is dismissed. Mr. Harding's actions, while unorthodox, were not illegal. The burden of environmental harm lies with the originator of the waste. The court finds the HOA knowingly and systematically dumped refuse on private property and misrepresented jurisdictional boundaries through falsified documentation. Counterclaim is upheld. He awarded us $65,000 in damages, $40,000 for the land, $10,000 for livestock, $15,000 for distress. He also ordered the HOA to pay for professional environmental remediation of the ravine. Then came the bombshell. Due to the nature of the forgery and emerging evidence of financial misconduct, this court is referring the matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution of Mrs. Payne, Mr. Payne, and other involved parties. Loretta didn't react, just sat very still, like a painting of a woman trying not to fall apart. I walked out of that courthouse without saying a word to her. Not because I wanted to be noble, but because anything I could have said wouldn't have changed what was coming. Justice wasn't fast, it wasn't clean, but for once it had showed up with steel-toed boots. They came with trucks and hazmat suits 2 weeks after the ruling. A private remediation firm hired by the HOA under court order arrived in gleaming white rigs like Ghostbusters for toxic shame. They wore full-body coveralls and respirators, sealed up tighter than the suits I'd seen on hospital TV shows. The irony of that, my cows had been grazing that land barefoot. I watched them work from the ridge above the ravine, arms crossed, a thermos of bitter black coffee in hand. They scraped up what was left of the mess, soil samples, debris fragments, dead grass, even the fence post with the old trail camera still bolted on. That post had caught the first dump run, the first proof, the beginning of all of it. I thought about cutting it down and burning it. In the end, I left it there, part of the land's scar now. I wasn't allowed to interact with the crew, not directly. The legal document said no interference, though the foreman nodded at me once on the second day. That was enough. The cleanup took 6 days. By the end, they'd removed 17 tons of waste, laid fresh topsoil, planted erosion netting, and flagged groundwater for biannual testing. The bill came out to just under $35,000, fully paid by Prairie Oaks HOA. Not that Loretta had a say anymore. She'd stepped down quietly the day after the hearing. No press release, no apology, just gone. Dale was finally served papers after turning himself in through his lawyer. Probably figured hiding would only make things worse. The DA charged him with environmental violations, fraud, and misuse of HOA funds. He pled out. Got 4 years in state prison and $150,000 in fines. Loretta got 2 years probation and a lifetime ban from holding any fiduciary position in any HOA, board, or municipal committee. The judge called her a conspirator in systematic misconduct, enabled by personal greed and abuse of trust. I clipped that quote from the paper and pinned it on the fridge next to the vet bill for Rosie. Carl Dellinger, the zoning inspector, lost his pension. The county fired him, and the ethics board blackballed him from public work. Word is, he moved out of state. And Prairie Oaks. The new board invited me to their annual community barbecue. I didn't say yes right away. Took me a week to decide. I thought about all the mornings I'd walked that stretch of pasture, thinking maybe I was losing my mind. I thought about how many people had stayed quiet or smiled while they stabbed. And I thought about Tessa's final article, The Farmer Who Fought Back. Her piece ended with a line I didn't expect. Justice doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it wears boots and knows how to weld fence. So, yeah. I went to the damn barbecue. I brought a smoked brisket in a cooler of lemonade. Kept to the side mostly, shook hands when folks came up. Some apologized. A few just nodded. One guy, Sean McKinley, the treasurer who had called me trying to de-escalate, came over with his teenage son, told me they were working on new bylaws, more transparency, asked if I'd be willing to look over them sometime. I said maybe. Depends on how much they pay in smoked meat. On the way out, I left a sign just outside the pasture line. Private property. Unauthorized dumping will be prosecuted. Cameras always rolling. Below it, in smaller letters, yes, I mean you. People laugh at that when they drive by now. Good. Let them. The ravine is quiet again. The grass is thin but growing. Coyotes returned first, then birds. I still catch myself checking for tire tracks after storms, but they're never there. The ground remembers, though, and so do I. Trash doesn't just vanish. Not the kind people try to bury. It always comes back, always finds its way home.